Hey, my name is James Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm just here in Doncaster at the moment, just having the final touches done to the most recent project that I bought with my daughter, Georgia. Now, this channel is all about growing a property portfolio. I'm growing my portfolio. Not only that, I'm building a portfolio for my two daughters. We've got Georgia, who's 21. This is her first house here. And we've got Emily, who's 1, who we're building a portfolio to for as well. Now, I'd love you to join us on the journey and find out the good, the bad, and the ugly about property investing. So how can you do that? You can take that finger of power, spin it around really fast, smash that subscribe button over there, and hit the bell notification. Now, in this video, I want to talk about how to use equity to grow your property portfolio. You see, I always had the belief that people who bought multiple properties, that they just saved up more deposits. Now, that can work, but it's very, very slow. Think about how long it took you to save up for your first deposit, or maybe you're doing that right now, right? And doing that just isn't really the smartest way to do it. So what you want to do is create equity in the properties you've got, and then you can release that using a buy-to-let mortgage. So let me explain how that works. Now, my first property I bought in Dorking in Surrey. You can see that on this channel. One of the first videos that we did was a little tour around that just before we rented it out again. And I bought that property for £45,000 back in 1999, so a long time ago. And that £45,000, I bought it on a personal mortgage. The deposit was around £3,000 then, and I only worked in Burger King because back then property was more affordable. It's got significantly more expensive. Now, over the years, that property has gone up and it's doubled in price, and then it's doubled again and a bit more. And that normally happens every 10 years. So we're about 22 years into that property deal there, because I've got it just at the end of 99. So that property has gone up to £90,000, then it's gone up to £180,000, and now it's worth £250,000. Now that means that I've got equity in that property. Now, if I had a repayment mortgage, I would have been paying that down and I might have zero mortgage by now. Or if I was on an interest only mortgage, I'd still owe the initial 45 grand that I paid for it. But imagine if I had it on interest only and I had not paid a penny off of the mortgage, so I'd still have now £200,000 plus in equity. So how can you use that? Well, what I did with that property was I released the equity, and then I bought my second property, which was a flat down in Hastings, for around £70,000. Now, I did that when the house had gone up to £90,000 value. I released some equity to get my deposit to buy that next property down in Hastings. Then a few years later, the market was really hot and that had gone up again. So I got even more equity in that first property, and I released that equity to buy a house down in Hastings this time for £110,000, and that's worth nearly £300,000 now. And so what will happen is over time, house prices will go up, and that will allow you to increase your equity in your property and remortgage it and release it. Now that's the longer way to do it, right? You want the shortcut, right? I'm sure you want the shortcut. Give me a quick like if you want the shortcut on that. That helps me greatly with YouTube, guys. Come on, take 2 seconds. Give me a quick like on this video. Now, how you can reduce that time. So let's just talk about this deal. I've talked about this deal lots, but it's a fairly easy one for you guys to understand, and the figures are all fresh in my head. So this property that I'm standing in right now, it's in Doncaster. We bought it for £60,000 at an auction, right? Now, we've just spent £12,000 doing it up. And so we've had a new kitchen, we've had a new bathroom, new carpets you can see here, decorating, plastered, a few little bits to do, like doors need finishing off and stuff like that. But on the whole, it was a fairly straightforward renovation project. Now, that property has now just been revalued. So we've only owned it about 8 weeks, and we've already just got the value up. We bought it for 60, we've got the value up to £100,000 by refurbing it and then getting the bank back out and putting a new mortgage on there. And that now means that we've created £25,000 in equity out of thin air. So let's just talk about that. We bought it for 60. We spent 12 doing it up, but then we've got legal fees and stuff like that, which comes to like another £3,000 and a little bit for stamp duty. But let's just make it round numbers so it's really easy to understand. So bought it for 60, 15 is then in on the project. So that's £75,000. But when we bought it, it wasn't in nice condition. It smelt, the kitchen was disgusting, the carpets were gross. It needed a full restoration. And that's what we've done. And by doing that, we've increased the value of the property. And we call this buy, refurbish, refinance, rent, right? And so then we've got a tenant. So we've already got a tenant agreed. They're coming in here tomorrow for 575, which is good. And we put a new mortgage on this property. And that mortgage is for it's valuing at £100,000. They will now give me my 75 grand back because they'll give you 75% loan to value. I hope that makes sense, right? So if your house is worth 100,000, they will lend you 75 grand. If your house is worth 200,000, they'll lend you 150 grand, right? So they will lend me 75 grand on this property. Now that's all the money that I've spent. So I get all of my money back, and I've created £25,000 in equity in that property. Plus I'm going to get paid rent, which is not going to be making me rich, but that will just keep ticking in and we'll make 575. Mortgage is a couple of £100, and obviously there's costs of estate agency and insurance, but we'll make around £300 profit a month, which is pretty good, right? for something that we've got no money left into this property, that's something that you're not really going to want to argue with. And so how many times would you do that? Well, you'd want to do that again and again and again, and as many times as you can. Now, look, every time that you do this, it might not work out. Maybe you get the property slightly down valued and it got valued at £90,000. But then if you got valued at £90,000, you still have £15,000 in equity. So equity is going to come by adding value. So that's one way that you can do this really fast. And that's probably the best way to do it, the safest way to do it. Or just because inflation means that the market's going to go up and house prices normally double every 10 years. Now, every area isn't the same. So don't think that every single town that you invest in, house prices are going to double. You need to look at the historic data, see has that happened previously in that area. Doncaster's pretty good at the moment where we're investing because they've just become a city and they've got lots of infrastructure going in here and stuff that is going to keep pushing the prices up. The affordability is very good here as well, which is good because that means that prices are unlikely to drop. People only need like 1.5 times their salary to get a house up here, which is pretty good. And so that's how you can create equity. And when you get that equity in there, you go back to your bank and you release that equity. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about is maybe you've got equity in your own home, right? Maybe you've got equity in your own home. So how do you deal with that? Well, one thing that's important there is you need to have make sure that you're still earning. So if you want to release equity from the house that you live in, then they're going to base that on the salary that you've got. So you can't just take out, I mean, if you had a house, for example, my property that I bought for 45 in Dorking's now worth 250, you're going to need to earn probably around 70 grand to buy that these days in Dorking. And so they will only let you take out the full money if it's on a residential mortgage, if your salary matches that. So how can you get around that? Well, one thing that people consider is moving out of their property and renting it out. And if you put it on a buy-to-let mortgage, you change from residential to buy-to-let, then you can release all of that equity. Because I've got friends that have got hundreds of thousands of pounds in equity that they'd like to use. They don't want to sell their property because they want to rent it out at some point. So what they can do is they can move out of that property, then rent it, put it on a buy-to-let mortgage, then the numbers will stack up. And then it's not really that important how much money you earn. On a buy-to-let, they're not so worried about your wage, which you do have to have a wage of at least 25 grand, but they're not so concerned about that. They're more concerned about, does that property pay enough rent to be able to loan you that money? Are you going to be able to afford to pay them back? So that's how you can use equity to grow a property portfolio. I think it's a great strategy, and I think you should consider it, investigate it, speak to a mortgage broker and find out a little bit more about it. But I hope you found that useful. Do go and check out all the other videos on the channel. We've got property videos where we bought this property at auction. We've got multiple videos where we've done updates on how this renovation went, the good, the bad and the ugly, because it didn't all go well. Some things we had that were major issues on that. But do go and check out all the other videos on the channel as well, and particularly go and check out this one here. Comment with any questions, and if you want to join our Facebook community, it's free. We've made a Facebook group where you can join, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Subscribe, hit the bell, and go and check out all my other videos, including this one right here. Bye for now.